My name is Sophia, and I run Silicon Valley Deep Learning Group with Adrian, Chris, and Allison. We have a wonderful speaker tonight. I met him at the Band of Angels talk, where he talked to investors about economic trends in AI. And he's a wonderful Stanford professor. He teaches a very popular class. He's also a venture capitalist with Woodside Capital partners. And tonight he's about to talk about economic trends. But first, I would like to give a few minutes to our sponsor, Royce Law. And this is Stephen Colby, IP attorney for Royce Law, who runs the IP division. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here this evening. It's good to see so many people. And as Sophia said, I am with Royce Law. We are a full-service law firm that specializes in early-stage startups. I am the director of the patent group, and we have deep depth in AI and machine learning, coupled with every different application you could possibly imagine, from medical companies to FinTech, coin, as you might guess, all kinds of stuff in between. And I'm looking forward to hearing this talk, especially some hopeful economic thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So make sure I'm in the frame there. All right. So anyway, thanks everyone for coming. This is an important topic, so it's good to see this many people interested, not just in deep learning as a subset of AI, but the economic trends as well, because we hear a lot of sound bites, but the dots are not being connected as often as we would like, and that's what we'll talk about here today. So I hope that by the end of this presentation, there are certain things you never look at the same way again. So we'll talk about artificial intelligence, the M&A trends, and economic trends. I do M&A at Woodside Capital, and then I also teach the class at Stanford about the economic trends. It's a combination of both. Now this, most of you know very well. AI required two distinct components which were seemingly unrelated. Parallel computing, because neural networks don't run well on serial computing, and parallel computing, like NVIDIA's GPU, run neural networks 20 to 50 times faster. And many of us studied neural nets a long time ago, back in the 20th century. And then it went away for 25 years. You didn't hear about that term anymore. Now you hear about it again, because suddenly a product that could do parallel computing, created for an entirely different purpose, created for gaming, is now the main computational power that is running the entire AI sector. And the second one is big data. Now, what amount of data is big? There's no absolute level. You always hear that what we have now is so much more than we had in 2015, but what we have 3 years from now will, again, be that much larger than what we have in 2018. But these two seemingly unrelated trends, which are exponential combined, and that's why artificial intelligence came out of nowhere, in terms of what lay people would see in late 2015. Now, we talk about exponential trends. When you combine two exponential trends, it's even more of a stealth approach. But as we can see, people think in linear terms, and it takes a lot of training to even begin to see things in exponential terms, a lot of practice. As you can see from the exponential chart, it's behind the linear chart for the majority of the time scale. Like, you could be 80% of the way through a timeline and still have extremely little progress, and suddenly it comes out of nowhere. And this is true for many processes in technology, and even some outside of technology, like the growth rate of the economy, as we'll come to. But this is very important to look at for every type of technology, and especially for artificial intelligence, because it was a double exponential, a convergence of two different exponential trends, creating a much sharper emergence out of nowhere for all but the few who are keeping track of it for the 25-year quiet period. So people say, well, how come AI is far away? As many of you know, there was a small boom in artificial intelligence in the early 1980s, and there was an AI winter after that. So what happened? But how come we still think there's no AI? Oddly enough, whenever a type of AI succeeds, it gets called something else. It's not included in AI. So the definition of AI keeps getting pushed out. And a lot of things that were considered AI in the 1980s have in fact happened, except they're not called AI anymore, as we'll see. And every benchmark of when AI is going to change the world also keeps getting pushed out when it's finally met. So we'll walk you through a little bit of a timeline here. In the 1980s, it was believed that when a human is defeated by an artificial intelligence in chess, it has to be the best human player in the world, humans are obsolete and everything will change. So this happened in 1997. Garry Kasparov was the best chess player in the world at the time. And don't just look at his face, but look at the face of the audience. Because if you go through the trouble of watching this in person in a stadium, that means you've heard 100 times that, oh, this is the end of the world, this is going to happen. Like suddenly AI is self-aware and humans are obsolete. And just look at the expression on their faces. This was 1997. Okay, that happened, and then they forgot about it. All right, chess is too easy. We need a different metric. And forget what we said before. We'll set a more challenging goal. And when AI passes that, then humans are obsolete. So they chose Jeopardy. When AI defeats a human at Jeopardy, humans are obsolete. That happened in 2011. That was on TV. And the middle one is the AI, IBM Watson. And look at how it's not beating them by a little. It's beating them by a lot. The humans are 300 and 200,000. And these were the greatest Jeopardy players of all time. They were the Garry Kasparovs of Jeopardy. 2011, okay. IBM Watson as an artificial intelligence defeats humans. And this was watched by millions of people on TV because more people watch Jeopardy than chess tournaments. So, okay, humans are obsolete. But then, well, nothing happened. The next day, oh, what's in the news now? Let's worry about something else. They forgot about it. So the idea was, let's choose an even harder threshold, a more difficult sport. So Alphago is a game I don't think anyone here actually plays, but it's supposedly very difficult and much more complicated than Jeopardy. And they said, okay, when an AI defeats a human at Alphago, humans are obsolete. Just because it's harder than Jeopardy, not that everyone plays Alphago at all, or you had even heard about it before this. Well, guess what? In 2016, the artificial intelligence wins. DeepMind was a company that made the AI that defeated AlphaGo, and it was acquired by Google for $600 million. But it defeated a human at AlphaGo. Oh, yet again, okay, the world did not end. Humans are not obsolete. There's actually more jobs in the economy than there were in 2011 for a variety of reasons. But you see how this threshold creep keeps happening. And all of these things except the first one were considered artificial intelligences in the 1980s, and calculators were considered AI in the 1950s. A calculator is an AI because it can do certain things thousands or even millions of times faster than a human. Before calculators, like you couldn't buy a calculator for the home until the 1970s. It was a big, thick thing that cost $1,200. You had to do long division. To do square roots and all that was difficult. You needed log tables. How would you do cube roots? You couldn't do that. Now everyone has a calculator in the free software included in your PC, your phone, whatever. You know that there are hundreds of calculators pretty much for free. You can never lose your calculators. I mean, it's so commoditized that everyone gives it away for free. Microsoft, Apple, everyone just gives it away for free. But calculators were an AI because they replaced millions of jobs that humans were doing. Search engines are an AI. We have no way to look back at what Google search was like 10 years ago, 2008, or 20 years ago, 1998, and compare it with today. But if you could compare them side by side, you would see how much more advanced Google is. The precision of search is much higher. Now you can do image search, video search. All those things were just added without much fanfare, but now we can't imagine not having them, even though those came later. Speech recognition has become more precise, virtual assistants more precise. Computer vision has automated a huge number of things. It's not something you see, but it has compressed many processes by factors of thousands or millions, and autonomous driving. So these are all types of AI that were considered AI back in the 80s, or even later than the 80s, and happened. So now we keep saying, well, when will AI ever happen? I don't see any AI. How convenient. How convenient that when something succeeds, it's not called AI anymore. And therefore, the problem is a lot of skeptics still say, oh, there's no AI, there's nothing. Well, AI is becoming the air we breathe. We would only notice if it were gone. That's how pervasive certain types of AI have become. And yet we're only at the beginning. Even though if people from 1982, the last AI peak, could see the world today, they would say, wow, they do have all these types of AI. This is kind of extreme. Now, thankfully, nobody here needs an explanation about this. You're probably tired of explaining to people what deep learning is relative to other AI. But here, you can see artificial intelligence revenue worldwide. So now we're getting to the actual kind of business metrics around there. It's still a very small sector. This is all of AI, not deep learning, which is a very small subset of that even. Most deep learning companies have very little revenue, including the aforementioned DeepMind, which was acquired by Google, had no revenue. The AI sector, even now, is still not more than $5 billion of revenue. And that's very little, but we're assuming maybe 50% compound annual growth per year, so the middle of the next decade, you can have 40 or 50 billion. That's a lot. Now, in an economic sense, 5 billion seems like very little. I mean, Amazon.com's revenue is 200 billion. The whole AI sector is only 5 billion. But this is a very reductive revenue, which means each dollar of AI has created $50, $100, $1,000 of deflationary effect in removing an old process and replacing it with something at much lower cost. So even a small amount of dollars has a very large secondary effect because of its reductive nature and its deflationary nature. And we look at what sectors are being disrupted by AI right now. Most of you have probably seen these charts, but you can see there's at least 15 different sectors that have a number of AI companies, and these are just the bigger AI companies in the sector. Everything from conversational AI to auto, robotics, medicine, text, commerce, IoT, and so many others. If you were to rank some of those sectors relative to each other with these charts from CB Insights, you can see healthcare is usually at the top and continues to be, because so many aspects of healthcare are extremely suitable for AI automation, and specifically deep learning. We keep hearing about instances where someone had a rare disease, and the person went to many doctors, and none of the doctors could find out what the person had. And then they went to IBM Watson, the same IBM Watson that won Jeopardy, and IBM Watson diagnosed the disease immediately. Why? Because no human doctor, no matter how good, can aggregate that much experience, can know about every single thing. There are 20,000 medical journal papers published in the United States each year. Even the doctor that wants to read as many as possible can't really read more than 100 or 200. Whereas artificial intelligence is extremely suitable to create a body of knowledge that will give you better and more precise answers as you use it more. And it can easily supersede not just one doctor, but even a team of 100 or 500 doctors. And then you see the other applications, like horizontal applications, and AI for marketing, AI for legal, things like that. But this is a general heat map, and the chart only goes to Q1 2017 because they publish after a certain lag. But these are the areas where you can see more disruption. And the ones with deep learning are closer to the top, like I mentioned. Deep learning is the real disruptor in medicine. Now, disruption by sector. Some are more suitable for deep learning. Some just have generic artificial intelligence. Medical diagnostics, very, very effective. In addition to the example I gave, think of all the secondary eliminations that occur in the existing cost structure. Right now, you have to make an appointment. You have to drive to the hospital. You have to park there. You have to go from the parking spot all the way to the waiting room. You make the co-payment. Then you wait. Then you're called into the smaller room. Then you wait again. Then you get to the doctor, and then he tells you something. And you think, oh, okay, I finally got to see the important person who will fix what's wrong with me. Now, yeah, they've studied a lot of things, but isn't a doctor, when you think about at least a general practitioner that you go to, they've just memorized the 50-some symptoms that they'll see and match it up with what they've memorized and what they've learned about diagnostics. So that's a very rudimentary search engine, in a way, unless there's a complicated question. AI can automate that very quickly and cause disruptions in a lot of other things. If you could access the AI from home, it could be available 24/7. You don't have to go somewhere, you don't have to park somewhere, no co-payment, all those things very cheap. Pharmaceuticals, the reason a new drug takes 10 years is partly because of regulatory reasons and other things, but also because the amount of testing that's required, the generates a lot of data that's not being used. So that if an AI could assimilate all the data, then you could conduct the testing in a shorter set of cycles. And for that reason, it could speed up pharmaceutical discovery and research. Search, we talked about. Search engines like Google just get better and better and better. Autonomous vehicles, very familiar with. It's taking longer than people think because I think they oversold it earlier, but eventually it will be a better driver than most humans, and just a huge amount of efficiencies to be saved over there. Cybersecurity, AI, particularly deep learning, can very quickly become more astute than the best hackers, and therefore supersedes what a hacker will think of, and fewer and fewer hackers can even overcome it, so cybersecurity becomes more and more robust. Legal and judicial, there's a lot of automation of processes like document review and e-discovery. And there's examples of, say, a discovery process that may have cost $2 million in billable hours now shrinking to 100,000 in some cases, just because artificial intelligence is kind of chewing through all the documents and finding the relevant content in a very, very rapid speed. Sales and marketing, everything from lead generation to conversational AI to support. There's just so many things that are easy to automate through AI. Computing itself. I mentioned before how artificial intelligence doesn't run well on PC CPUs and require GPUs, but even then, the NVIDIA GPU is not something that was even meant for AI. It's not very well suited for AI. It's just better running neural nets. It's still on the 16 nanometer process even. So just in getting the process size smaller and making more AI-specific chipsets, there's a lot of upside there, and a lot of companies are working very, very feverishly in this regard. Logistics, there's so much data in a huge amount of supply chains because supply chains are so international. The data generated from that can enable a lot of backwater third-tier locations to achieve parity more quickly and therefore create a more global supply chain, and countries that are behind in terms of their participation in world supply chains have yet another chance to catch up if they focus on the right niche by using the data generated by AI to refine their effort. Retail and e-commerce, this we've all experienced how the recommendations on Amazon are getting more and more precise, the data through all the sales, and the migration of more and more transactions to the online space generates more data, which makes it more precise and makes it pull away even greater and greater versus brick and mortar retail. So these are just about 10 of the sectors where we see a lot of AI disruption of different types, and all these sectors are unrelated to each other, yet they're being disrupted by the same types of AI. So we can take one or two questions here, and then I'll go to part 2. No question? Yes?
I want to go back to legal in the last slide.
Yeah.
Do you see any applications as it relates to intellectual property?
So there's a lot of automation that can be done there. There's a startup called PatentSys that is just one of them, because the patent process, the patent process is still very expensive, and people say, well, it's just the cost of patents. But if a startup has to do that first, that's very prohibitive for them because they're doing it when they have the least amount of money, and the patent lawyer and the patent filing office take the money first. The patent office also has huge backlog. Some automation of the process can relieve this, 2 or 3 year backlog that currently exists. So there's a lot that can be done with patent search and patent generation, for sure. PatentSys, PatentSys is one startup company doing that. There's a few others. Okay. Any others? No. All right. Now this is a thing to think about, AI and jobs. If you go into the mainstream media, you'll say, well, will your job be automated? They like to scare people about that. It's the gift that keeps on giving because the media is in the business of making people either angry or scared. But there's AI in jobs in a positive sense. Can you improve your own job through AI? Can you do the work of 2 people by using AI and collect twice the pay? And some people are doing that, and sometimes that happens without people realizing it. But here's a chart from McKinsey. And it doesn't label each of the jobs, which are the orange dots, but you can see percent automatability as a vertical axis and hourly wage. And about half of the jobs are highly automatable. and about half are not. But it's not a one-for-one replacement. If, let's say, half of your tasks in your current job can be automated, I mean, don't worry that, oh, if I'm in the lower half, I'll be removed. The way a person should think is, can I implement some form of personalized AI so I can automate all of those tasks and then do twice as much of the other half, thereby maybe earning twice as much? And that's the way to think about it, because it's not a binary one-for-one replacement. Some jobs are 80% automatable. Some are only 10% automatable. Even if you're 80% automatable, that doesn't necessarily change what I said. That means, well, okay, just do 5 times as much of the 20% that you can do, but figure out how to do that and have AI work for you to do what is being automated. Because if you're not, then your peers are. And to stay in place is to be left behind. So a simpler chart, this is the type of chart that you'll see in the mainstream media, like percentage that your job will be automated. You know, the usual suspects are at the top: telemarketers, accountants, retail salespeople, real estate agent. Now, there's 2 problems with charts like this. One is they only talk about the jobs that will be eliminated, but they don't list the job that will be created. The number of software engineers in the world has doubled every 4 or 5 years, and that trend is not stopping. Not everyone can become a software engineer. But at least such a chart, to be honest, should list both lists, not just these are jobs going away, but we're not going to show you the jobs that are going to be created, number one. And quite a few people point that out. But there's something that is really not pointed out, and I really want you to think about this from now on when everyone talks about automation. Look at all the jobs that are highly automatable. I see only private sector jobs. Why are there no public sector jobs here? Like the DMV clerk or the or any. Because you would think that a government job, at least the government bureaucrat or the DMV clerk or the people that you get to talk to after 1 hour on hold for the IRS or Social Security Administration. Oh, so why not those jobs? Those seem to be very, very repetitive, very well formed, very easy to automate. And automation of those jobs would be a direct savings to the taxpayer, right? So if the taxpayer's job is being eliminated, then the tax he pays should experience the same level of more utility per dollar, should they not? But these lists only show private sector jobs. I guess they don't want people to even think that way. Well, the government bureaucrat, you know, it should be up here. So that's part of the problem. They're trying to make people not think about that, and people are trained not to question these things. They'll see this list and say, oh, private sector jobs. When in fact, that is the bigger disruption, because if you look at which parts of the economy are the lowest productivity and where things are being done the same way as they were done many decades ago, those usually are in the government or sectors heavily influenced by the government, healthcare, education, and so forth. So that is really what one should think about with artificial intelligence. Well, why is the private sector person only at risk? Are they less productive? Are they somehow imperfect relative to the government job? Certainly not. And this is going, and AI doesn't care. Like, AI isn't fooled by lists like this. They'll eliminate a job or an entity that is preventing elimination of jobs. It just goes higher and higher, as we'll see. But we'll come back to the public sector later. This is something to think about in terms of longer-term transformation of jobs in the economy. In the United States, there was a time when 70% of the people worked in agriculture, and they only produced enough food for 100%. So they produced enough food for themselves and half another person. So 70% of people need to produce food for the 100%. Now, only 2% of the people work in agriculture, and the population in the United States is 12 times higher. So 2% are producing food for a much larger group of people, and America exports foods. And even after that, there's too much food. America has a problem of too much food, not too little. But this happened over a long time, so nobody talks about it. There's no sentimental attachment. Where there is sentimental attachment is the second sector, industry. You can see how, you know, after World War II, the United States was the only country in a position to have a large manufacturing sector, and for 30 years, it was the sole producer of a lot of things such as automobiles, airplanes, electrical goods, and heavy machinery. And then, jobs went down somewhat. But this is not as dramatic of a decline as we are told to believe. Oh, you have to have manufacturing jobs, and what happened to the Rust Belt, and what happened to this, and what happened to that? Well, okay, that's nothing like, agriculture. It went down somewhat. Then service jobs rose in the place of both of them, and it only kept on rising. Now, it's true, service jobs are being eliminated by artificial intelligence, like from the list we just saw. But these types of transformations are normal, and people feel bad because they're only looking at this, for example, and they don't count this. Or because the same time window, the last 40 years, people only think about what happened during the middle 40 years of their life, not before or after that period. Oh yeah, farmer jobs going away. We never hear about that in the news. Even look at the reduction that occurred. Yes.
So what do you think is the fourth line next after services?
Well, a subset of services is knowledge creation, and I think that is important. It's not called that, but eventually will be, because if you segment out services, you'll see a bifurcation in that. Another reason private sector jobs would actually be less prone to automation than public sector, but we'll see. Because when we talk about manufacturing, right, that's the example, as though that's the worst thing that's ever happened anywhere in any country ever. Oh yeah, manufacturing jobs declined a little bit, down a little bit from the peak. But people are thinking in terms of the number of jobs, not the quality of job, the pay of jobs, or the output of the sector. Look at this real manufacturing output per US worker. Notice that even this time scale, over the same period we saw in the previous chart where the number of jobs somewhat went down, it never stopped rising. Forget about staying flat even. It only ever kept rising. And it's doubling in shorter and shorter times. And look at how each doubling is in less and less time. The output never stopped going down. And yeah, I mean, taken to the extreme, the question is, well, what's the end game? Will the US manufacturing sector just be $5 trillion generated by one person? Well, no, remains to be seen. But the dollar output never stopped going down, because there's more and more automation, so fewer people. The denominator shrinks. But to say the US manufacturing sector has ever had a major decline? No, because they're equating the output of the sector with the number of jobs. That's not the right thing to do. And notice how we still see this same parabolic chart that we see in all futurist type projections of exponential technology. You see the same thing here in an economic metric, a parabolic exponential rise. There's another factor. So when you think about this, think about a robot doesn't replace one job, sometimes it replaces 4 or 5, because it works 24/7. It does not need holidays. It does not need health insurance. Even if its arm falls off, you just reattach it. Can't do that with people. But that's not even the most remarkable part. When you have a robot like that Baxter robot from Rethink Robotics, the fact that it can work 24/7 and they say it works at only at $1 an hour, that's not what's remarkable. What's remarkable is in the AI in that robot and others like it, when one of the robots learns something new, like how to do something with one hand instead of 2, since all of the robots are connected to the cloud, all of them suddenly know the same thing. And that's something humans can't do. Like if you know something that I would like to know, you can't just download it in 10 seconds and be on my way, right? If I know something, like why am I presenting? I should have just downloaded the presentation. You know everything after the download is done, right? Humans can't do that. But with AI, when one of them learns something, all of them learn something. That's where you get the exponential improvement. Because the transaction cost between transfer of knowledge from one human to another, or even self-teaching, which is the same thing, just takes a long, long, long time. How many years are we in school? How many years are we in college? We're still learning things forever. For the AI, all that time is 0. So that is something to think about. Yes?
So now that 2018, 8 years after that, or 17, is any updated numbers for that?
I've looked for that chart. This person hasn't updated the chart yet, but it's only still gone up, actually, because the job market, in fact, was stronger again over here, but it's not in the manufacturing sector. It's still in the service sector. In fact, we see more and more examples. In Tennessee, there's a factory that produces washing machines. They produce 5,000 washing machines each year. There's only 140 employees because there's a lot of robots. There are a lot of small manufacturing companies in the US interior just one garage and maybe 3 guys, and they have 10 million of revenue just because they have a 3D printer, they have a couple of robots, none of those require salary, but their top line is as though they had 50 employees. So there's a lot of little examples like that. US manufacturing is in a renaissance. You can look at the ISM manufacturing index to see that a renaissance of output, but not of jobs. And this brings us to the other thing to think about. When the media tries to scare people, they focus on, they actually fall into a trap themselves. They only focus on job replacement that is slightly more productive than human, because that's easy to see. Like if there's a hotel where all the employees are robots, there's one in Japan, they say, oh, there are robots here, these must have taken human jobs. Or if the McDonald's or Taco Bell has robots, oh, these were humans that used to work here. Because it's slightly more productive than a human, 1.2x, 1.5x. And that's why they see actually the least productive AI, not that more productive AI. Because one AI is more than twice as productive as a human, and in many cases 100 times or 1,000 times, the entire business model changes so that it's doing work that humans were not doing before. I'll give you an extreme example. Not far from here, there's a Stanford Linear Accelerator, SLAC, and the astrophysicists there, they would look at thousands of astronomical images to look for whatever they're looking for, X-ray radiation and gamma rays and things like that. Then they got a computer vision algorithm that is 10 million times faster than the human astrophysicist. 10 million times faster. So what it would take them 4 months, the computer vision does in 1 second. So what happens then? Did it eliminate astrophysicists' jobs? No. There aren't enough astrophysicists in the world to do that much work, 10 million times as much work. If there was, there's no budget to hire that many. And even if there was, you could not coordinate all their work. So by compressing out what was taking so many months of time, they can focus elsewhere, because the whole process, the whole calendar timeline of the project changes. The 4-month block becomes nothing. They can focus on something else. It didn't eliminate the jobs of the individuals working there, because it's now generating so much output that there were no humans doing this much anyway. Have you ever wondered why when you call a private sector support is 24/7 with very little hold time? Because there's automated voice. Whereas if you call, say, the IRS or the Social Security admin, you have to call between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. on a weekday. You're still on hold for an hour. And then you get the person, and you can't get back to the same person if you get cut off, because they don't use this AI. You know, once you put AI, the government agency will say, well, we only have budget to hire this many people. That's why we have to be 8 to 5 phone support. Well, if your AI could be 24/7 because no salary, so the supply suddenly became infinity, and no one would have a hold time. And so that's another example of when it becomes much more productive than a human, it just changes the business model altogether. It's very inaccurate to say it replaced this job or that job. If it's 2 or 3 times more productive, or in many cases 10 or 100 times more productive, it's just an entirely new business model altogether. You know, remember how many people used to be telephone operators back in the day, right? Those were actual people who did that. And then there were probably tens of thousands of people employed doing that in the United States. Right? How many people were full-service stockbrokers, things like that? The automation that replaced them was so much more productive that it made the cost of that effectively zero. So there's no one-for-one replacement. That's why people are much more against robots and not against AI that they can't see, whereas all the real gains in terms of a high multiplier effect are from software-based AI rather than robot. Robot is something they can be angry at because they saw it. Software-based AI, not so. So they can only get mad by seeing a chart of jobs. And then this brings us to the other point that is never talked about when there is a basic discussion. Oh, automation is taking jobs. So we have income tax. We're used to that. The United States didn't have income tax until 1913, but now you're used to that, and everyone's so inured to it that it's kind of a resignation that we have. But if you're in a high tax location like California, and federal plus state is half of what a person was making, if their job is automated, they're losing half of what they were, quote unquote, making, the top line number, not the post-tax number. So they're losing half. Who's losing the other half? Right? And if large numbers of jobs are being automated, and unless an equal or greater number are being created, isn't the government seeing a loss in a very pinprick, decentralized type of way? And don't all disruptions have a very decentralized kind of nature? How can the government cope with that? It's a big, static, powerful entity that collects taxes, income tax regime. But when this automation is happening, what can they do? They're not agile enough to even pinpoint the losses. They just see a fall in revenue, how some people who were certain payers are paying less. And it's not that the people never got jobs again. Artificial intelligence kind of exposes the mockery of certain things, in that many loopholes that were available only to the ultra-wealthy are now very quickly become available to a lot more people, because the tax code was not written with AI in mind. There's more and more examples of a company that, like I say, has 10 million of revenue and maybe only 3 human employees, and the other 47 humans worth of work is done by artificial intelligence. Since most of the work with AI, that AI can be offshore, doesn't have to be in a location that's nice to live or anything. And therefore, all your output is offshore, and your money doesn't have to be repatriated, and you now have the access to the loophole that was meant for very few people, only for the biggest corporations like Apple or movie stars or musicians. Now a small 3-person company can do that. As long as you never repatriate, there's no tax. The AI can be in 10 tax havens on the same day. How are they going to find who to apprehend or who to complain about or what? It's perfectly legal because our tax code is structured this way. So the AI is kind of exposing the very perverse nature of a very complicated tax code. It's complicated to allow certain loopholes and things, which were meant each for only a very small number of people. That's why they're so hard to find those. But AI can find those, and a small company can now do what only Apple or Google could do, or only a movie star could do, or only a musician could do. And can the IRS plug these loopholes? Well, okay, then they harm the original people who are using it too. They have to create a new one, but AI can find that right away too. It's a game the government can't win. You can't pretend to have a high tax rate and then have loopholes and then assume, oh, nobody will find it, so this loophole is only for you. That's going to be very hard to do from now on because of artificial intelligence. So coming back to what I was saying, aren't government jobs automatable? On one hand, we're saying income tax is going to be harder and harder to collect. Technology and money is moving at a speed faster than the government would like. Technology and money doesn't care. If you look at the ICO phenomenon, which I'm sure a lot of you are watching closely, it's arisen because the regulatory bodies were too slow to fix the existing system, so this is just a breakout in its place. If they try and clamp down on that, there'll be a breakout somewhere else. So income tax is going to be harder and harder to collect. But maybe you need a little bit less income tax too because of what I was talking about. Let me give you an example of how much we're trained not to question certain expenditures. Every year when you renew your license plate, let's say $400 per car in California, what do you get for that? You get a license plate, and that matches up to your driver's license number and your insurance. And so if you're pulled over, they can verify it. It's an ID registration system. Why does it cost $400 a year? It sounds like if it was just through the blockchain or automated on a website, it should be $2 a year, right? What is so complicated about it? It should cost $400 a year. I mean, Netflix is only $96 a year. Look at what you get for that. Look at how many things are free, like YouTube, and a whole bunch of other things. iTunes is only $1.29 per song. Can you consume $400 worth of iTunes per year, year after year? No, you can't. Yet your vehicle registration is $400 a year, when the service they provide could cost much less. $2 a year, which might as well make it zero rather than even have the processing infrastructure to collect $2 a year. Same with if you have an LLC or C Corp. In California, that's $800 a year, and that's not even counting the registered agent. So if you're a startup, when cash is tight, and whether you make any revenue or not, you have to pay $800 a year. What do you get for it? You get some phone support, which you have to wait for an hour for. It's only 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You get a tax ID number on that LLC or C Corp that ensures that you pay more tax and can easily be tracked. And whatever security that exists through the LLC or whatever, that's what you get. Now with AI, all that support should be done by AI. The security should be provided by blockchain or some simple ledger. why is it $800 a year, right? What are you getting out of that? If you compare any private sector tech product that you're spending money on relative to what you are accustomed to paying, even for these basic government things, that annual license plate registration with the DMV is a good example. It's very, very, very lopsided value for money, because this is not, the government infrastructure is using 1950s level processing with no desire to improve productivity, a DMV visit, it tells you that there's no technology used to lower costs. And the government measured its own victory based on how many jobs it created. Whether they were needed or not, jobs created, at least in the United States. That is a problem, because by stretching that to such an extreme, the government has made itself very vulnerable to artificial intelligence. We say, oh, the government will never replace jobs with AI because they measure themselves by keeping more people on government jobs. Well, what do you do when you're getting squeezed on the other end? AI is eroding more and more of the tax base. If you do an ICO, you know how Mitt Romney had $20 million in his Roth IRA, even though you can only put $6,000 a year? That was meant only for a very small number of people. But now if you do ICOs, you can, some people under ICOs can avail themselves of that same loophole that was meant for a very small number of people. Yet another example, technology finding a way. So this is where you're going to see the government's going to have to adapt, because their revenue stream is itself being disrupted. And they have really no way of stopping that as much as anything, because how many mosquitoes can you kill with a sledgehammer? Not many, right? I've written an entire book about this subject. It's available as a soft copy. This is a hard copy here, but it's also a free soft copy, 450,000 views and featured on a Google Talk. So you may want to look at that as an explanation of how government will have to adapt. But when we talk about automation of jobs, the government being under a death by 1,000 cuts attack as we speak, and what the entrepreneur should do, that leads to a certain elegant type of way to think about these things. If someone's job is being automated, as we saw from those McKinsey level charts, you can feel bad. Oh, if I'm below the line, I'm in trouble. No, that's how much of your job you should automate and do the rest that you can automate, and then you can do the job that's currently being done by 2 people, and maybe collect twice the salary. Think that way. Even if you're at the very bottom, 95% automatability, that means all those jobs are being automated, you and your 3 colleagues next to you. So isn't your boss pocketing all that money? Isn't your employer pocketing all that money? Doesn't that mean their margin is very high? When someone has high margin, shouldn't they attract competition, especially competition by people who know that business? That's how a person should think. Every automation of a job is simultaneously something that makes a business model different and a previously unviable business model possible. Let's say you have a $3 million revenue stream that's in your mind, and if it took $3 million a year of cost to generate $3 million of revenue, that's not a business, that's a break even. It's not a profitable business. But what if automation could automate many aspects of the headcount needed to do that? And suddenly, to generate the same $3 million or the same top line, you have only $2 million of cost. Suddenly the business model that was not viable becomes viable. Sometimes that can be stretched to extremes, like the example I gave, 10 million in revenue by 3 human employees. And pretty soon you'll personally know more and more acquaintances that are making money that way because that type of automation occurs. When you see a chart like the list of jobs being automated, you shouldn't worry, oh, am I too high on the list? The real entrepreneur should think in terms of, these are all the functions I can get done from very low cost without hiring someone. Is there a business model I can invent that makes maximum use of those positions? That becomes the business model to think of. You can have a high top line with no cost. You'll see examples. There'll be businesses of, forget 10 million for 3 human employees. You'll see someone generating 20 million a year only by themselves because they automated 99 humans worth of work based on what their business model was and what was automatable. And that's the way to think about it. It's not a process that's new, because like we said, 70% worked in agriculture, now machines do that. But now it's much faster. And one has to think about it in terms of their career and their entrepreneurial prospects, because this is what angel investors and VCs will demand. Fewer employees, so faster break even. Faster break even means greater utility of investor capital, even if you need less investor capital. And that will also be a differentiating factor between whether startups have an attractive business plan or not, and that is happening more and more. So with that, we can take a couple questions as well. Yes?
It sounds like you have accepted the fact that many, if not most jobs will be automated, that, the jobs that we understand now, and you say you take an entrepreneurial role, but you also mentioned that there could be a threshold in which, there may not be, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Where some people cannot, program or develop software skills to, be an entrepreneur and compete against that market.
So not everyone can be an entrepreneur on short notice, for sure. That's why there has to be a medium in between. And I've written an entire book about the subject, so you should look at this URL. The government has a role, but it has to modernize in a certain way, like monetization of technological deflation rather than taxation of productive output, and therein lies the solution. Ultimately, there has to be reform on both the safety net end as well as the front end. And in here, you'll see a lot of details for that. There's a lot of data that describes it. But technically, at the moment, there's still more jobs in the economy than many years ago. There's still 145 million jobs. So the net creation, despite everything the government may be doing wrong, the net creation is still more than the net reduction, at least at the moment still. Yes? Okay, yes.
So one thing different about this automation or this job changing environment is the displacement of white-collar jobs. Because in the past trends, jobs which have been replaced are generally on the lower end of the scale. When we're talking about literature search, we are talking about patent lawyers and doctors, and if we talk about analysts, we're talking about FinTech disruption. Those are jobs which are relatively high paying, and that's
So the higher paying a job is, the more it's automatable through AI because there's more net saving. Number one. That's why doctors, I said, are very highly automatable. But the entrepreneurial opportunity is the same in that sense. When we say patent lawyers, who is being automated? Probably the mid-level lawyers doing the doc review and the search and all that, but not the very top one doing the litigation and maybe the claim charts. So he can do more business because this is automated. He doesn't need an associate. Therefore, a solo patent lawyer can compete with a larger firm, and that's how the model adjusts. And that's some way to think about that. The top line revenue doesn't necessarily shrink, but more of the dollars accrue to to the top slice. And the determinant there is not whether they were a good patent lawyer in the pre-AI world, but whether they are a patent lawyer who is also using AI to increase their top line while keeping the same or lower costs of attaining that top line. But one has to think in an entrepreneurial sense. Our K through 12 education system does not teach people to be entrepreneurs. It's quite the opposite, in fact. And that's the other problem. There has to be disruption there as well. AI through personalized learning and that sort of thing. Yes?
So you showed a graph of productivity.
Yeah.
Exponentially rising. But so it's based on the assumption that human learning ability will keep up with the exponential rise in productivity, because you have to learn more to be able to produce that generally. So is it possible that that will not be the case?
There could be a ceiling in the more distant future, like 20 or 30 years from now. At the moment, no, because our current education method is an extremely blunt instrument. I mean, I can openly say all the time I spend in classrooms was a waste because I wasn't oriented towards classroom-based learning. I'd get bored, look at the clock. Oh, only 2 minutes have passed. I thought that was 10 minutes. I'll try not to look. Oh, damn, just one more minute. I spent, whole K through 12, entire youth spent that way, and probably a lot of people in this room. But we're nowhere near the ceiling because AI is going to create greater personalization. There are education software companies who are incorporating AI that create so much personalization that your speed of learning will be much higher, and therefore your consumption will be much higher. I think we see now a lot of 10-year-old kids are much, much smarter than we were at that age, much more articulate and knowledgeable, just because the amount they have access to is much more. And this is before AI-based personalization. So we're not far from the point where even the average person will seem extremely intelligent compared to us today, just like we would all seem extremely articulate and intelligent compared to people in the 19th century. So that process is still ongoing. AI for personalized learning is a low-hanging fruit that will greatly increase the speed of learning intake. Yes?
Hi. As you mentioned, almost all those jobs with low skill levels, they are more easily be they will more easily be replaced rather than those top level lawyers or doctors. So then the income disparity will become even larger in the future.
Well, not so much, because you can see here, it doesn't correlate that much to the wage. You know, and the higher paying profession is more attractive for AI to automate, right?
Yeah.
The tiger doesn't chase the mouse. The house cat chases the mouse. The tiger chases the antelope.
Yeah, but
So,
as you mentioned, even within the same profession, the ones with higher level skills, they tend to.
Yes, but it also levels the playing field more too, because the small-time patent lawyer, they may not have money to hire associates and things like that, but then with AI, hey, I can compete with a big firm, and I can generate $2 million a year in billable hours, and my costs are only $100,000 a year. Some people will be able to do that. It's a new skill set that's emerged. Being able to implement AI is the big managerial skill set of our times now, because having a staff that works for you without pay effectively is what the benefit is, and then what top line revenue can you achieve by having those non-salary demanding AIs at your disposal. And did I miss someone over here? Okay. I want to answer in the order that they raise their hand, but I don't want to skip anyone. Yeah. Yeah.
Take 2 more questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I have more technical questions. So you know that deep learning, it's very hard to trace how it make decision. So do you think it will be a blocker to use this technology, for example, in healthcare? For example, if you have a doctor, you know how he thinks, he can explain why he made this decision. But when AI says, okay, you have a cancer, you cannot understand why AI made this decision.
So that's a good question, because deep learning is particularly useful in healthcare, but it doesn't tell you how it arrived at the decision. The patient doesn't care. The patient says, cure me now, I'm in pain, I'm suffering. If it can be reverse engineered at some point, that would be good, but I don't think people will stop deep learning, because the patient will not be denied that. They'll go to another country that says, okay, we'll cure you. We can ask questions later and do a post-mortem if you'd like, but if this can cure you now, then don't ask too many questions. So, I mean, I don't think usage would stop just because the explanation is not given, especially when something is urgent like healthcare, like cancer, right? The patient's not going to wait, because I need an explanation. Until then, I won't accept treatment.
What happens if the patient dies and he gets sued? The AI won't be able to justify its decision. The lawyers will have a field day.
So the owner of the AI, in this case IBM, would have to take that into account in the business model. That happens, but I mean, you could sue your own doctor at Kaiser right now too. So that's not a new thing. It's just a transfer of the liability from a Kaiser to an IBM, and that's where the business model and the liability insurance has to take that into account.
And I think the AI attorney probably going to sue.
Well, if it's not earning money, maybe the incentive is different. We'll see. Yes?
How about software engineers?
So more and more software does get automated. Like I'm told by people who've done software for 30 years that certain things that they had to do manually are now automated. But the top line is so much that, in fact, the number of people working as software engineers is rising higher and higher. Georgia Tech has created an online MSCS that is not only $6,700 to do, but more importantly, can take 10,000 students. And since it's remote, you don't even have to go to Atlanta. You could be in India and China and still pay just $6,700 and get a master's degree from a well-known institution, a top-ranking institution. And it has cumulatively graduated 5,800 students so far, which is a lot more than like Stanford. Stanford might be 300-400, MIT 300-400. So there's just still much, much more demand for software engineers and personalization of software engineering education. It's unusually well suited for personalization, is going to rapidly increase the competence as well. So the bachelor's degree of tomorrow will know more than the PhD of today and that sort of thing. Yes? Okay, you're next. Oh, yeah.
How do you think AI is going to change the way companies work with their customers and customer support and the relationship that
So there's a lot of changes in customer support, because since more and more support is through text, there's a lot of natural language processing that can be done on all that text data. The availability of support 24/7 is very easy, so people assume that they can get something without having to wait. And just so many other aspects of personalization through whatever the big corporation is providing. There's more product segmentation that's possible because there's less wastage of data, and it becomes a more precise instrument rather than a blunt one.
Okay, last
who was
question.
The last one?
Last question.
This is going back to what someone here just mentioned about the wealth disparity. So capital appreciates faster than labor. I think
So if you like that question, you really like this book because there's the monetization of technological deflation possible. You may have heard of the idea of tax robots. This is a much more sophisticated version of that. This is to monetize all the very diffuse deflation. You could have a universal basic income rising at exponential Moore's law rates, sub-Moore's law rates, and 0% income tax. In fact, I claim that universal basic income is possible not through tax increase like everyone else wants to do. It's only possible through tax decrease because, as you mentioned, AI greatly can deliver a lot of these government services at a much lower cost. Therefore, the taxes needed to fund those services are less and can become zero. So if you're really interested in that subject, you must check this out. Free online ebook. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This is really interesting. Kartik will still be here, and you can find him. But thank you, Kartik. Thank you for everyone. Obviously, there's going to be a lot in this space. The economics of artificial intelligence as, it grows and accelerates. So, watch this space.
And there's never a better time to be an entrepreneur because now you need fewer people to do the same thing,
But you're still working 24/7, so you have to
But
be
so
prepared
is the
for
AI,
that.
and it's really 24/7.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.